Kia ora koutou and welcome to round 2 of our long-term plan hearings. We have quite a full agenda this afternoon, so I would ask members to keep questions and answers brief. We have 10 minutes allocated to each submission. That time includes the presentation and the questions and answers. Just a quick reminder, we're not here to respond to submissions or debate any points that are being made, but to ask questions and get clarification so that we can consider the submissions as we go through the process. So first of all, I'd like to invite Bede Larrissy, who's presenting the Ramati Community Board submission. Welcome, Bede. Kia ora anō. And Tan, he's here to support.
Good afternoon. I'm Bede Larrissy. I am Chair of the Raumati Community Board, and this is my fellow board member, Tan Sheeran, who's here to wow you with some amazing facts and details. Isn't that right? No, she doesn't want to speak, but feel free to ask her questions. Look, we are the newest of the community boards. This is our first term in existence, and boy, what a ride it's been so far. I sat in a briefing or a workshop, I'm not sure which it was, I think it was a briefing last year, and I made a complaint and I said, look, I'm sitting here in Raumati watching yet another bucket of money pour into Waikanae, and here we are in Raumati still wondering when it's coming our way. There was a presentation from the Raumati Village Business Association about Raumati Village, which hopefully made sense and showed where there's been some serious deficits in terms of resources. Look, I know that the cupboard's fairly bare this time around, and we weren't going to kind of put in a submission for a whole lot of money to be spent with us that doesn't exist. But I do think that from Raumati's perspective, we generally speaking not feeling the love in terms of where the resources are going. So that's my main concern here, really, for Raumati, is just to really put my hand up for my community, and we need some warmth and love coming our way from council in whatever form that takes. We can probably sit through and kind of talk through various points, and I'm happy to take questions about stuff. A couple of things that occurred to me recently. What used to be State Highway 1 was handed over to council. Maybe now we can look at some proper signage for particularly Raumati Village on that old main highway. Can I put my hand up and say maybe we can raise the speed limit back to 80 k's, because driving along there at 50 k's is almost like crawling and it sucks. But really, I'm not going to sit here and kind of make a whole lot of demands. It's really just an opportunity for us to put up our hand as a community board for our community and to converse with councillors. This submission was initially put in last year, so a couple of things in here are out of date. Particularly around the phasing of the pool building and things like that. But you guys have no doubt got some questions or comments to make, so happy to throw it open.
Fantastic. An excellent written submission covering a number of topics, which we've all read. I've got a question from Liz Coe.
Yep. Thank you. Look, I just wanted to check in on the old pool. I know you ran a session some time ago on possible uses for that. Where has that process got to, and are there specific uses been identified through that process that would make use of the premises, and have we looked at the rate of return on investment, so to speak, in terms of doing up the building and then renting it out?
So as a community board chair, I'm only privy to parts of conversations, not the entire dialogue, but the earthquake strengthening is going ahead. As usual, it sort of suffered the odd delay and wasn't done as soon as it was hoped for, but it is in progress. So that it was rated as a high risk in terms of its earthquake risk, but the cost of getting it up to code wasn't high. So that is in train. Won't be finished by June as was hoped, but it will be done. The maintenance schedule is mostly on hold pending that work being done because of the work that has to be done, but hopefully that maintenance work can start again then. My hope is that in between then and having a permanent tenant long term, we could maybe use it as a community somehow. The previous GM for facilities was happy to look at filling in the pool so that we could start doing that. I don't know if that's still a live thing. My personal view is that council shouldn't be funding a business to go in there and make money. I think if work can be done as part of a leasing arrangement that is covered through that lease arrangement, then that's really useful and productive. Key thing for me looking at it though and thinking of my community is it needs to be something that's going to bring life to an amazing part of the world, something that's going, you know, the community is going to be able to access, and that's going to kind of be open to a broad sector of the community, not just a kind of a small part of it. It'd be a shame to see it kind of used by a small sector and kind of dark and lifeless. But no, those conversations, I kind of probably don't want to leap into them too far at this point.
I guess the point of my question was, is this, you know, like an investment opportunity for council, so to speak, whereby if we spend a little bit of money, we could get a reasonable sort of revenue coming in from it? Or is your preference to see it go towards community uses where there might not be quite such a rate of return on the money invested?
Define investment, but from a business investment, I think something that's going to yield a return will be more likely to involve more people. I think I'm not sure as a community hall, so to speak, is going to be the best use of that space, but it won't be for me to decide that, right? It's not my decision to make. I think probably it's best to let the community speak about that, look at what those options are. Probably the ideas that we've seen on the table, the most viable one from a business or returns perspective is probably the owners of the waterfront business and their idea. Probably the most likely also to be able to obtain the investment that would be needed for it. But again, it's not my decision to make. But
Okay, all right, thank you.
would be good to see that conversation push forward more quickly.
Yeah, so we need a process around that?
Yeah.
I think, yeah, okay,
Yeah.
thanks.
Councillor Pravanov.
Thank you. Even though I live in Waikanae, I hear you.
Thank you.
First of all, are you aware that the Kapiti Whai tour process, upon which I've been the council rep on, will make a difference to the quality of the water in the Wharamaku stream?
I'm not very keyed into that process, but I'm very pleased to hear that. Thank you. Excellent.
Yes, yes. So just watch the space.
All right. Awesome.
In terms of the seawall, I'm just wondering whether the concerns from the community are based upon the needs of the community or protecting council infrastructure.
Probably a bit of both. I mean, you know, things get done for a purpose, but then people attach all kinds of other purposes themselves onto it. And so, you know, you end up with all kinds of reasons for wanting or not wanting something. But certainly in terms of, I mean, everybody wants their water assets in the road to stay in place, and that requires the seawall, but they also want their beaches still. And there's a conversation been happening lately about the top of the wall and what's the proper use for that. And council's view is that that's a sort of a maintenance space, and some of the community are saying, well, that's our walkway. It isn't funded as a walkway, but if that conversation is wanting to happen, it needs to go through that process. That's a separate conversation from building the wall. But the main concern really is that people just want that wall to be built and maintained. So they just want to make sure that through this long-term process, that is confirmed as happening.
Excellent. So I have one more question. I see that there's the earthquake report has been done for the swimming pool. Are you able to share that, please?
I think the last time I asked, it wasn't quite ready for access, but the staff would have that available.
Okay.
If it's available to be shared, then yeah, I'm happy to see a copy myself.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Councillor Wilson.
Yeah, thanks, Pete. We had a number of people came in and submitted, and particularly around seawalls and major infrastructure. One of the suggestions was that it be something of a user pays, so the people who benefit from it pay for it, like, so a targeted rate. Would there be any appetite? I mean, obviously people don't want to do that, but would there be an appetite for that if that was the option?
Well, of course, I'm going to say no. But I'd say it's difficult to say that only Raumati benefits from the seawall, right? I mean, people from all over the district come and use that beach for all kinds of reasons. And again, it's to maintain the infrastructure, not the houses as such. I think user pays. I'm very cautious about user pays arguments because where does that stop? Should we apply it to medicine, for example? I've not seen a doctor for probably 10 years. So why should I keep paying for medical treatments that I'm not having? Okay, but I'm more than happy to chip in my butt. I think it's a council-owned asset. And it's part of council's remit to maintain it if it's going to stay maintained. Probably next time it needs rebuilding, it's more likely that we're going to have those conversations because I think there's going to be a lot of those conversations coming up in the future decades. But now, don't you dare.
And just to clarify around Waikanae, decades of underspend that's starting to slowly
We
catch
are not
up.
here to debate with the
No, just to
submitters, Councillor Wilson.
It was just to clarify. But thank you.
Yeah, sure, mate.
Councillor Halliday.
It's
Moving
right.
swiftly on.
Hey, Pete. Look, mine's just actually building a little bit on Councillor Coe's comments around the pool. But if we are looking at pushing this conversation, sort of what's been mentioned over the last hearings and stuff with things like a sound shell in the wider park potentially, as well as maybe mini park, all that sort of. So I don't know how much of that you've heard, but I'm under the impression that the splash pad's being upgraded shortly. As such. So do you think it'd be merit sort of perhaps having a more joined up conversation about what can happen in that area, so to speak?
Totally. I'm all for big picture conversations, and there's probably a lot of them to have. But yes, the Vision Project would be a good way to do that, perhaps, to push that out and get a more focused conversation about the park. We have submitted around a sound shell type structure for the park, and I think given that there's no money in the kitty, maybe we could look at just a sort of a fairly cheap temporary structure with a view to seeing how it gets used for a bigger idea down the future when there is more money to spend. But maybe testing ideas through those sorts of means is quite useful. But yes, the short answer, yes, absolutely, would be good to have those conversations.
Cool. And I just wanted to comment on the colour down there in the murals, looking really good as well.
Right, yes. I've heard that's happening, yes.
Quick
Thanks, Madam
question from
Chair.
Councillor Cofer.
Yeah, thanks, Bea. It's a really rocking little village. My wife was in the Kapiti Concert Orchestra, played in the park there just last Sunday, and it's a brilliant venue. Sound shell, yeah, that would be good to have. And have you done any progress on that? I saw it was featuring in the long-term plan.
No, we've just sort of put it as a submission really to see if we can get some traction on something small that might generate a few bit more talk, bit more ideas, and maybe next time around there's something more.
Okay, I know there've been a lot of questions, but the phasing of the pool building, should be a feasibility done for the use of it before the earthquake reinforcing work's done, because a lot of walls can be put in for bracing and they could be quite effective for partitioning and things like that. So perhaps a feasibility report on the use of the building and the upgrading, with the earthquake work. Signage, it's you need a few signs just to show where you are. But you cover Raumati South too?
Yes.
Yeah, that's a vibrant little village too, with the restaurants and the cycleways and walkways and things. So, yeah.
Beautiful part of the world.
Yeah. So you want more signage for that?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
And of course,
There used to be in the days. There used to be the chocolate factory had a big sign, and everybody knew to turn at the chocolate factory. But that's not quite as clear as it used to be.
Sure.
And Village Beach, or what does it say, Raumati Beach and Shops, doesn't quite fit the bill
and
either.
also the cycleway onto Queen Elizabeth Park needs to be a bit louder too, doesn't it? Because it's a little bit away from the village.
Yep.
And the sea wall, of course, that's an ongoing thing. Of course, it's granular displacement with the sand, isn't it? It's moving around, and as time goes on, it's just getting deeper and deeper, but that's something we've got to look at when
Yep.
we design it. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Bede. Thanks, Tan.
All right.
We'll move on.
Thank you.
So we're already running a little bit late, so I'm going to be quite strict on the 3-minute presentation followed by questions. That was less than 3 minutes, but we had a lot of questions. But I'll move now on to Kim Hobson. Welcome, Kim.
Hello, I'm Kim Hobson.
Hi, Kim.
A ratepayer up here. I did 5 separate presentations, but or submissions, but yeah, they sort of run one into the other. In particular, I've got some concerns that there's lots of documents internal in the council and that have been submitted to government with regard to the Kapiti Coast not being able to deal with wastewater, in particular stormwater. So basically, yeah, that's what the crux of it is. And with the new pipeline that's gone in, it's feeding water straight into the Wharamoku stream, which is obviously this side of the motorway. It's influencing the water table level, particularly along Rata Road. The council's aware that some of the properties along there have got their own lakes, and some of those lakes have increased by 120 millimetres since the motorway's gone in. Compounding the issue is the council is not actually clearing the drains anymore, so there's a backlog of debris in the drains which is preventing the water from flowing out into the stream and somehow across the motorway and down there. But probably my most important one would be number 5, which is where I refer to what I'm determining a wet sustained peg or sustained wet peg. I'm not a member of CALM or CREW or anything like that, and I don't necessarily support their methodology of just putting up stumbling blocks and the likes. I think there'd be more benefit to the outcome if there was a positive step forward where the council could take something into their own hands, and a sustainable wet peg scenario where pegs could be located along the coastline. And it's detailed in my submission, but if the peg is sustained at a wet specific level for more than 6 continuous months, only then we need to enact upon a scenario of determining that sea level has risen. Because obviously the sea level rising has got a consequence on the water inundation and how we're getting the Wharamoku stream out to there. And I'm also concerned that the new development that has been proposed by Wellington Company and Ian Castles, with the additional water load going in from the Wharamoku stream, and they are claiming to actually be expanding the wetlands, but there's no way to actually get rid of that water. Are they aware that there's, you know, a major inundation problem? That should have been done under their due process, due diligence, but it seems that the council is potentially overlooking such an item of getting rid of the water that is generated, particularly this side of the motorway or expressway.
Thank you for sharing your thoughts today. Councillor Pravanov.
Thank you, Kim, for coming along to speak to us and your very thoughtful submission. On Thursday, we had several other submissions about water inundation and water levels. You mentioned that the drains weren't being cleared out. Do you know why that is happening?
One of the residents has had the council there, and they have just raked the leaves, and when he said it needs a digger in to scrape it, he was told by the council member that there is no funds available to clean the drainways.
So this is KCDC?
Yes, KCDC.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Wilson.
Yeah, hi Kim. Had a couple of enjoyable chats. Kim, just running down in it's down Rata Road. That's
Yes.
the drainage part that you're talking about?
Yep.
Have you contacted anyone directly at council about that?
I haven't myself, but I understand at least two of the residents have, yes.
Okay.
And there's been no outcome. From my conversations with one in particular is that he has indicated it is since the expressway's gone through, and the council has informed them that it is a land transport or a Wakatapu issue, not a council issue. But at the end of the day, he doesn't really care. His lake is increasing, and with additional water load going in, and then another 1,000 houses going in as well, it's all hard surfaces. And when it's in nature, as in wetlands, it may take 3 or 4 days before the water gets to the stream. You put a pipe in there and it's there within 3-4 minutes, and then it floods or inundates on this side. So it's a big compounding issue that although the developers that are feeding into the new pipe may not be aware of, but downstream, and it's us as the ratepayers that have to pay invariably for something that's happened upstream.
Oh, thanks for raising that, and it leaves us with some questions to ask as well, so that's good. Cheers.
Not seeing any more questions. Thanks for your presentation today, Kim.
Thank you.
Good to see you. Regional Kai Network, Angela McLeod. Right. Okay. Then I have Martin Setchell. Kia ora, Martin.
Hello.
Approach the table.
Thank you. Good afternoon. I have just a personal submission, which adds to the very brief outline I put in on the form. According to the latest Consumer Price Index data, council rates remain one of the most inflationary contributions to cost of living pressures, with the flow-on effect fueling rents rises too. So I think it's vital that local government plays its part in taming inflation. These double-digit rate rises perpetuate the climate of pain in a vicious cycle. This proposed one-off average 17% rates increases is an unacceptably high hit, especially on superannuitants like myself on fixed incomes who got an increase of 4% this year. It's higher than many other councils. I note that my former city of residence, Christchurch, is proposing only 13.24%, and it's a big city with major issues like the ongoing earthquake rebuilding, the Arts Centre, Orana Park, and so on. And of course, it's only an average. I'm horrified to see from the calculator that my rates rise would be 27.5%, and that's 27.5% on the already increased 2023 revaluation. So it is a double whammy. I looked at the three components: the 10% unavoidable increases in costs, inflation, rising depreciation, and so on. Beyond your control, okay, I think that's accepted. The waters business, I think, is a very complex issue, and I think it's work in progress. And I have opted for option 2 to debt fund the 4.7 million shortfall on the grounds that there may be some progress with government on this. Yes, it would increase debt, but there are some signs from what I read of government help. And this is obviously just happening right now. This mega water entity with the boosted borrowing capacity is maybe on the cards for the Lower North Island. And I gather some councils are already in talks with local government Minister Simeon Brown about legislation changes which might be needed. I hope that this council will join that conversation. So we come to the 2% remaining, the discretionary budget, and obviously there's more wriggle room in this. Here are some of my thoughts, and I'm shooting straight from the hip on this. One, I think we need to curb the role of council being a great provider for everything by substantially reducing things like the annual grants provision. Two, what about greater staff efficiencies? The government has ordered a 6.5% cut in operational saving from public sector budgets. Has this efficiency drive been undertaken by this council? I know you've just capped staffing. Three, external consultancies. To what extent are they reducible? Four, what about the frequency of services? Can they be reduced without discontinuing them entirely? Five, I do feel that there are some vanity projects. Whether they're still in force, I couldn't see mention of them in specifically, but I'm thinking, for example, of this proposed renaming of the old State Highway 1 with 7 sections, each with separate Maori names. I hope you will listen to Councillor Liz Coe, who's proposed a simple, less costly solution, renaming the whole street, for example, Old State Highway 1, retaining the existing numbering, adding a single short word and opting for a name which everybody knows and can understand. These harder times going on, I think about the charges. They might, in fact, reduce your revenue because I think there'll be a higher demand for facilities with no direct charge and a lower demand for those which are chargeable. It's already user pays with water and rubbish collection. So I wonder if there is a chance to consider charges for facilities which currently are 100% funded by rates. 7, increase fines for late payments, infringements, noise, dogs, parking, etc. They could be increased, I'm sure. 8, I read that the Department of Internal Affairs has ruled that museums and galleries wouldn't have to pay levies to fire an emergency in New Zealand on the insured value of their collections from July to 26. There's a redesigned insurance levy coming in. I wonder if this saving, a potential saving, has been allowed for in your plan. And finally, again, we read that there is pressure from local government New Zealand to continue to a tax relief campaign from government to address what they consider is a broken funding system. Mayors have been advocating even for government to return a proportion of GST collected on rates to councils. I think that's fairly optimistic. But however, there is progress. And apparently the government has already agreed to consider sharing a portion of GST collected on new residential bills with councils. It was in the coalition agreement. So I think there are a few sort of chinks of light which I wonder if they've been looked at in terms of setting the rates. So in summary, like most householders in these economic times, I'm forced reluctantly to put unessentials on hold, to concentrate on essentials, and to cut costs where I can. I simply ask you to do the same. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Martin, and thank you for coming with solutions as well as problems. We always appreciate that. Councillor Wilson.
Yes, thanks very much for that,
Hi.
Martin. Can I ask what part of town you're in?
We're in Kakariki Grove up the hill, just off Winara Avenue.
Oh, right. Yep.
Right at the end of the road.
All right.
there.
I was just wondering about, so you've calculated that your rates, it's going to be what,
On the
27?
calculator, I put in my address, and that's what came up.
Oh,
And,
right.
it was staggering. You know, when you see 17%, you think, wow, that's enough. And then you see that actually that's only an average. I don't own a sort of, you know, mansion, or I wouldn't have thought of particularly. We don't have swimming pools and tennis courts and things. So I don't know how that's worked out, but that's, according to the calculator, what we would be facing.
Every person's home is their castle, of course. But yeah, that was very interesting. Just no, I was going to raise the point about the government policy around water, just likely to allow councils to vastly increase their debt rather than actually handing back some money.
I just wondered if the council does go ahead and load it into rates without waiting to see what eventuates from the obviously current negotiations with government in relation to Three Waters. It's sort of gone ahead. I think if we waited and perhaps did opt for temporarily anyway debt replacement, therefore reducing to 12%, there might be some, if we rush ahead and load it into rates, we've almost gone down that road without waiting to see what government might do.
No, thank you very much. Cheers.
Councillor Halliday.
Yeah, hi Martin.
Hi.
Great name. Just wanted to say thank you very much for a constructive submission. We've been getting the neck from a few people over the last little while, but I've just really appreciated shooting from the hip, but done in a respectful manner. Just want to say thank you for that.
Thank you. Well, the best of luck. I don't envy your task, and thank you very much for listening.
Thank you very much, Martin. So we've got now Pat Doonan on Zoom. Welcome, Pat.
Thank you, Janet, Mayor.
We can all hear you.
You can hear me okay?
Yep.
Thank you. Thank you very much for the opportunity to submit on this. My central submission is simply concerned with the raising of the percentage of median household income that the council proposes to take in the form of rates. As I indicated, there is no immediate explanation as to why it is appropriate to go from 4.7% to 7%. And that I think that the 5% level established by David Shan's study under a Labor government is the level that the council should try to keep to. Having said that, I do want to offer a couple of thoughts on how you might achieve this. In the first instance, I think that it is appropriate to consider a degree of reduction in service levels for particular services. I won't specify a view on which services might be modified to levels be modified to make a saving, but because I think that's the role of the council. But I believe that you could make some reductions and that the ratepayers would consider that that is one response to the situation. Secondly, I want to hone in on two specifics which draw on my expertise. I was manager of New Zealand's public debt for a period, a very fraught period in the late 80s and early 90s when we were facing downgrades and a number of matters. So I do speak from some knowledge of the issue of debt. Secondly, I managed Telecom's debt as General Manager of Finance. Specifically, I think that in the case of the proposed fund to partly protect against the prospect of catastrophic events, that it is questionable whether building a fund is the appropriate approach at this stage. I suggest that there clearly is a need among councils across the country to have a ability to cope with a catastrophe, but rather than each council attempting to build itself a small buffer, the more appropriate way to view the matter is for the local government financing agency and perhaps the Earthquake Commission to be seen as the basis for a collective provision. And certainly there is the question of whether an insurance that covered all councils would be more easy to put in place and the necessary reinsurance to put in place. Coming down to, so I suggest that the council should, together with other councils and talking to the local government financing agency, take up that as a much superior approach to the one that is being suggested. Then there is, just in regard to what is insured and what is not, I just offer the thought, and I think another submitter will explain it in more detail, that the underground structures are the ones to insure, not your car fleets. You can easily withstand the destruction of a number of the cars. That should be self-insured, just as it would be perhaps for somebody who has an excess on their home insurance. So there is something odd gone on in that area, it would appear. I come next to the question of the way the council manages its debt. And I just note that apparently from the description in the accounts, it is normal to borrow ahead of time, indeed 12 months ahead of time. I haven't been able to find out whether exactly that has been followed, but again, the local government financing agency is the obvious port of call to ask for a revolving credit and a backup so that if something was to be difficult in terms of raising, that you have a guarantee. In other words, there's a better way of doing it, I suggest. Finally, come to water. And in regard to water, the hard reality is that the water system needs quite a large amount of capital. As we're seeing, the government is proposing with the Auckland structure to achieve this by more borrowing. And in a sense, if that is to be the way, then it really is not make too much sense for the council to now decide on the eve of those structures being proposed to instead finance it from rates. In other words, for the moment, until the new structure is put in place, it is arguably appropriate for you to finance next year's water investment from debt. So with those comments, Mayor, Janet, I'll halt my presentation and take questions if you have any.
Thanks, Pat. Just checking your video is deliberately turned off.
Oh, no, I'm happy to turn it on if I can find where to do so.
See your face?
Turn it on.
There you are. We can see half your face anyway.
Oh, yes, sure. Okay. There we go.
Oh,
Right.
something's gone wrong again. Oh, there you are. Yes,
You can see me
lovely to see you there. Thank you very much
Okay.
for your thoughtful and informative presentation. Councillor Kirby, the Deputy Mayor.
Hi, Pat. Great to see you, and thank you for your submission. I've just got a question. In your submission, you use the phrase many areas of expenditure which are good to have but not essential. Could you help us with identifying maybe one thing that you would consider as a good to have and not an essential?
Well, I think it is possibly best to refer to opening hours, although I'd be reluctant to suggest that you drastically cut opening hours. I think that in Kapiti area there are staff who would be prepared to work shorter hours, because it would suit them, and that therefore, with some reluctance, but in order to save money, I think you should consider whether you reduce the service hours of some of the services provided. And secondly, so rather than cut, when I talk of nice to have, I'm suggesting that that is opening hours as well as other things. Perhaps weekend opening hours, I mean, dare I say it, to make the libraries open in the afternoon rather than in the weekend mornings. And that sort of move is what I would suggest. I see it as an approach that you could adopt that would actually add up to quite a bit of savings while not eliminating particular services that people value.
Okay, great, thank you. I just hear that comment that we should cut our nice to haves and keep essentials, and often the question that follows up is what is that in terms of people's expectations of what is a nice to have. So thank you for that that insight.
If I could just add one further thought. The council does an exceptional job on sort of really high quality publications. When I go into the office, I am always impressed with the quality. But there is another way of looking at that. I'm not sure what the total publication budget, including the preparation of them, the design and such like. It's sad to say, but there could be a saving in being a little bit less high quality, to be blunt.
We call those our glossy brochures.
Yes.
And we have talked about reducing those, but thank you for that. Thank you, Pat. Appreciate your submission.
Councillor Wilson.
Hi, Pat. Yeah, thank you very much for your submission, and commiserations for the time that you were the manager of New Zealand's public debt. You look like you've weathered it okay. Hey, Pat, my question's around self-insurance. Thank you for raising that. It's a subject which I'm a bit of a fan of. You mentioned the likes of cars. I just wondered about the above-ground self-insurance in general, because we've had year-on-year between 20 to 25% increase in insurance costs, which is astronomical amount. So I actually put that kind of level of insurance in the nice-to-haves. But the self-insurance, so have you thought more about just how far you would go with that?
Well, I have increased the excess on my house insurance and also actually in other areas. I think that the council should consider that. In other words, more of a excess. I'm not sure what claims you have typically ended up making, but I think it's well worth your while to review that, and certainly to consider whether buildings, some of the less vital buildings, you might consider leaving uninsured. You do need an expert, of course, to advise you on which adjustments would save which amounts of money, because the insurance supplier company will respond in different ways. But yes, I think you should definitely see a greater role for self-insurance, as well as the bigger picture that I spoke of, where I think councils, given that Auckland faces floods and volcanoes, we face earthquakes, there is a degree of diversification implicit in that would allow an economy potentially. There's a third thing which I'll just mention without going into it, which is use of catastrophe bonds, which are a debt instrument whereby if there is a catastrophe, the insured party which issues them does not have to, the lender takes part of the loss.
All right. Okay, thanks for that. And just clarification, Mark might be able to give it to us now. The revolving credit from LGFA, do we currently have? Yeah, so we currently have that as a facility now, I'm told. But yeah, that's a good line.
Does that mean the council is not needing to pursue the policy that is enunciated in the annual reports of under the Treasury of borrowing? I mean, it's just the way it's worded. It conveys the impression that everything is borrowed a year ahead. I didn't think that actually was what was meant, but it's how it could be interpreted.
Should we clarify that now? Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's get some clarification on that.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. Yep, we do have a revolving credit facility, both with the LGFA and our bank, but it's been substantially reduced because of the LGFA. So prior to the inception of the LGFA, it was in the order of $50 million, which was effectively our ability to refinance. So that has now been reduced to $10 million because of the LGFA success. So the revolving credit is there for emergency cash flow, as is LGFA, but the pre-funding is a completely different mechanism in the draft Treasury Management Policy. It has to do with refinancing our debt, nothing to do with the revolving credit anymore.
Right. Councillor Coe?
Thank you, Pat. We're obviously in very difficult economic times right now. I'm interested to know whether your call for greater austerity on the part of council is something that you see applying just for this part of the economic cycle, or do you see that this is something that should be a permanent feature of council operations?
Well, I think that the guide of that, and I do applaud the fact that council puts it out, the analysis of the percentage of median household income that the council is proposing to take away. I think that is a appropriate indicator, which would mean that if we all were to enjoy particularly favourable economic times, then the rating ability would increase, and so that would be the answer to your point. It is particularly now because everyone's income is being significantly affected by the difficult process of eliminating inflation, that taking an increase and doing all the precautionary measures that are built into your long-term plan right now is undesirable, in my view.
So you would see council operations expanding and contracting along with economic cycles in that case?
Not so much, but I certainly, the sort of area that I spoke of about hours of opening would certainly be appropriate to expand and contract. But more to the point, I think that when times are extremely tough, the council does have to cut its cloth to suit.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Pat. It's certainly a really interesting discussion around your submission today, so hugely appreciated. Thank you.
If I could just make a very last comment, I won't pursue it now, but I didn't really understand why the pre-funding was being described as entirely separate from the revolving facility, because the revolving facility, I would have thought the purpose of that is a funding problem as well as a catastrophic event. But I'll leave it there. But I felt that, in fact, the separation of those two as entirely separate and managed separately might not be desirable.
So we'll get in touch with you with some information around that. The finance team will follow up.
Thank you.
That's great. Thanks, Pat.
I appreciate the opportunity to talk to you. Thank you very much.
Okay. Thanks, Pat. So now we've got Gerald Rees on behalf of the Waikanae Pika Pika Beach Residents Society Incorporated. Good to see you again, Gerald.
Good to see you, Mayor, councillors, good to see you. My name's Gerald Rise. I'm here on behalf of the Waikanae and Pika Pika Beach Residents Society. And unfortunately, I'm going to sound like a broken record because I will be reiterating a lot of the issues around the affordability crisis, the cost of living crisis we're talking about, and how that might fit in. As most of you all know, we've got high inflation, we've got high interest rates, we've got about unemployment of 3,500 public servants, a lot of them probably living up here on the coast as well. And so this issue and how it relates to living costs going forward, and also the impact of the rates increase, which I've been informed is going to be close to 19.5% on average rather than the 17% put in the council documents. Also, the sort of cumulative rate rise of 8% after that. So we're looking at sort of double the rate of inflation, continuing rate rises going forward at this stage. So the other key element is the issue about the council's 5% affordability target for people and how that's going to increase to about 7.5%. So with a lot of the people in Wellington departments being subject to a 6.5% departmental expenditure reduction, which we're all being, including myself, has been subjected to, we believe that there could have been a consideration of some of these options of reducing services in light of the policies that the government has chosen to take. So further options rather than just looking at basically added costs, options of looking at reduced services and the impacts on rates could have been put forward to ratepayers. In terms of the Three Waters, unfortunately that's been such a fast-moving feast that we've been outstripped by the government. The options that we'd preferred was actually having half and half of the two options, half debt, half water rates increases basically, mainly because we've taken some hard decisions in the past about water meters, and we should be getting the credit for that decisions we've taken in the past, and also that we should have some of it in debt for other people, new parties that came here to pay off that. In terms of the social housing, we support option 1, transfer to a new provider, because we believe that that will get away from the sort of past encumbrances of the social housing policy. But we do wonder about the asset value of those houses. Should they have been sold off and put into recovering debt as opposed to being written off the asset books? So we're not sure about the policy that the council's taken in that particular case, or sold to the government or to a trust, and then that money used to pay off debt. In terms of the Climate Change Fund, we don't believe that there should be a new appropriation there now, mainly because we've got the CAP process happening. We haven't got the document yet. We don't know what the policy is going to be, and then the council has to look at that, the overall district-wide strategy, and also how that might relate to any national strategy as well. So we don't see any need for it now. You could actually get the cost by having some decent accounting with unique codes to find out how much you're spending. In terms of policy changes, rates remission, we think some of that could be considered a social policy for central government, actually, responsibility. They're quick to pass stuff on to councils, let's pass something back. And IRD is in the best position to actually look at to assess the financial details of eligible households as well. Revenue and finance, we think that you should be using best practice and getting the values from Treasury and the Reserve Bank and IRD, which I hope you would be doing. Development contributions, we think that there should be a greenfields fee and there should be a brownfields rate as well, which would be different. We see full funding of infrastructure costs needs to be paid and potentially a bond for 5 to 10 years after that to fix up any future problems, because it's interesting how much these new subdivisions deteriorate fairly quickly with no sort of recompense for the council to actually look at getting something back. In terms of fees and charges increases, we think it should be held as close as possible to real cost increases after an efficiency audit. So we'd want to see an audit to make sure you're getting the costs as near as possible to what the actual cost increases should be. Enhancing democracy, I think we should be looking at timings for events that as many stakeholders as possible can turn up and actually allow for more engagement, perhaps even sort of chat, putting questions into the chat when you're using Teams. It's interesting, I've had to take a half a day off work to come to this meeting today, basically, so actually getting it at the right times is important. In terms of the 10 priorities on your page 9, we have got priorities around 2 major areas. One of them is the resilient waters environment, and you've been hearing plenty about that from other parties, but we'd just like to reinforce the bit down at the beach in both Peka Peka and Waikanae Beach. And the second priority area is the network connections and communities, I think priority area 4. Regarding the waters work, there's probably 3 elements there. We've had, over the last couple of years, there's been a lot of issues with stormwater, particularly at Peka Peka, but also there is the issue of the weir at the south end of Waimanu Lagoon, which hasn't been operating properly now for 12 years. Now, you know, we're asking, why can't this be fixed up? And this affects the whole drainage structure all the way up the coast, essentially, because this is the first part that goes into the sea. So we're saying, you know, there needs to be a proper accounting in the 24 to 34 stormwater allocations, and that's what we're asking for in the long-term plan. There needs to be clear money set aside for that. And the other point is, it's interesting, we also note the 2 recent, what I call damming public reports on the emergency responses to Cyclone Gabrielle and Hale, including completely inadequate responses by relevant councils, which I think this council needs to take into account. And we request an independent review of KCDC emergency response procedures to a similar sized event, if that were to happen here, and any resilience measures needed to immediately put that in place to resolve that. Because in those cases we saw even loss of life. And the 2 reports have been quite damning of the lack of adequate response. My last area is around the connected communities. This is where the broken record keeps on harping to you. The Society has been, for the last 5 years, has been advocating for the replacement of the Waikanae Beach Community Hall, which is well below acceptable national building standards now. And even from your infrastructure report that you put out as part of the long-term plan, we see it as one of the 2 lowest lifetimes left in the district.
Wrap up soon, please. If we could wrap up soon, that'd be great.
Yep.
Thanks.
So we believe that there will be there are options there. Basically, the society is prepared to look at funding. We've found a site. We've looked at basically doing a design for the property, and we believe that it would be appropriate for the council to look at a sharing option with the society. We estimate the cost will be about 3 million, and we request that 1 million is set aside in the long-term plan in years 26 and 27 to allow for completion before the 4 years runs out. So that would be, yes, 2028. So that's my presentation.
You were
Really
nearly
appreciate
finished
it.
anyway. I jumped the gun. Thank you very much. A wide-ranging submission. Councillor Pravanov.
Thank you, Gerald, for coming along today, taking half a day off, and a very thoughtful submission that you put in on behalf of the Waikanae Beach and Peka Peka residents. I'm just going to ask one question, and that is in relation to the last topic you spoke about, which is the Waikanae Beach Hall. You mentioned that you have done some work, or members of the society have done some work on plans. Have they been submitted by any chance to council staff, and what is their response to them?
I'm not sure if they've gone to council staff. They've certainly been submitted to councillors anyway. So whether that's been passed on to council staff, I'm not sure.
I think I did, but I'll go back and check and get back to you.
Because I know there was a meeting just before Christmas last year with council staff
That's
about
right.
this.
Yes. Yeah, I think you're right. Basically, it has been a meeting discussing it with some of the council staff. I think that the staff member has now left. So.
Okay, thank you.
Any more questions? Councillor Wilson? Oh.
Thank you. Thanks, Gerald. Really appreciate this. You completely concur about the Waimanu Lagoon weir. I was down there a couple of days ago, and it's not good, is it? The Waikanae Beach Hall. So the 1 million for the LTP was I didn't quite catch that. So for that,
So we believe it'll be
27, 28 or 26, 27.
For each year. We believe it'll cost $3 million. The community could probably look at getting 1 million, and then we'd look at 2 million from the council, having 1 million each of those years, 1 million in 26, another million in 27.
Oh, I
basically,
see. Yep.
With the contribution from the community as well.
Okay.
And
just
that would then enable it to be built over time, basically, and be put in place before the longevity of the hall life finishes.
and so was the spot for it, is that down in
We believe it
Queens?
should be next to the expressway, basically, just immediately down the off ramp, basically coming down the land to the left.
by Narara?
No.
That Narara development? No, hang on.
Oh yes,
Yeah.
that's right. But on the other side of the road, basically, by the Narara development.
Okay.
We believe that's the most appropriate place because it will serve either sides of the community.
And I will just ask a quick question. Who owns that land at the moment, do you know?
We understand it's probably who actually, I'm not sure whether
Yeah.
it's
We can check that out.
transport people, yeah. But I think there is the issue of the whether it could be acquired by the council to basically as part of the revocation process for the expressway.
Yeah. We'll check that out.
Yep.
Thank you.
David Shan.
Mayor, would you allow a brief indulgence to me to make a quick comment on the 5%, which is, speaking of cracked records, it seems to
I
be
think
cropping up.
we should definitely make an exception this time.
I just want to quote from the so-called Shan report, very briefly, very briefly. And of course, Pat also raised this issue, and he's an active member of your association, I think,
Yes, that's
Jared,
right,
indeed. Just to say, with rates, this is from 2007, with rates overall averaging less than 3% of gross household income, it is difficult to say that there is an overall affordability problem. However, there are significant pockets of ratepayers where there is an affordability problem. Affordability problems are likely to be an issue in low-income households and those reliant on New Zealand superannuation. As a rough benchmark, affordability problems arise where rates exceed 5% of gross household income. We estimate that there are between 100 and 200,000 such households, which constitute between 7 and 14% of the total households in New Zealand. Furthermore, the panel's analysis shows that these affordability problems will increase over the next 10 years. So I just wanted to thank you for the opportunity to put that on the record, because it does keep coming up, and it's not hard and fast, and it's not based on totally exhaustive analysis, because at the beginning we say one of the major problems in discussing this issue is data problems. But we did our best at that time, as it was. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you.
Councillor
thank you, Madam
Coфord,
Chair.
that's a hard act to follow.
Well, we do have an equestrian member here, and there's a nod saying that was straight from the horse's mouth. But
Sure was.
But Gerald, no, thank you very much for coming. That was a really in-depth report there, wide-ranging. Just one clarification, please.
Yes.
You alluded to the development levy, and you mentioned the greenfield and brownfield developments.
Yes.
And also the bond is a good idea, just to cover us after 5 to 10 years. But what did you say about the greenfield levy? Was that going to be a higher development levy, or?
I think we see covering actual costs, basically. Of the
Cover the costs,
yeah. That's right.
Because the development levy doesn't cover the
No.
total infrastructure.
No,
Thank you very
right,
much.
yes.
Okay, that's
Good, thank you.
great.
Well, that was a very interesting discussion. Thank you so much for your submission. There's so much going on down there. Thank you for the work you do with the society in general and everybody who's involved down there. Really appreciate it.
Cheers, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Michael McKeon.
Afternoon. Michael McKeon. I'm just speaking in support of my submission as a private individual. The thrust of my submission is ensuring that the importance of Kapiti Airport to the district's reflected in the long-term plan. The current situation of the airport doesn't reflect its potential for Kapiti, and that's really easy to forget. So that was a point I wanted to make. I'm trying to remind the council of the value of what we've got here. The airport precinct's an underused advantage that Kapiti possesses that sits alongside our other quality of life advantages like climate, environment, better local body infrastructure and good road and rail links. It's a large underused space of 130 hectares right in the centre of Kapiti. Kapiti needs more good jobs if it's to reach its potential as a great place to live in all measures. And a developed airport and a business hub around the airport will help spark this. It only requires half of that 130 hectares for operations. The rest of the site can be developed for other purposes, and such as aviation, businesses, technology, as seen in other airport precincts around New Zealand and the world. I don't think we need to use it for more housing. KCDC planning's got enough housing to meet demand without having to destroy that unique open space. The housing capacity assessment identified 33 to 55,000 feasible and realisable dwellings in the district. It's hard to say what a future low carbon economy and transport system will look like and whether the airport will play a role in that, but it's always wise to keep infrastructure options open. Because the opportunity that they offer for the future can be lost forever. We'll never be able to replace a facility or an opportunity like that once it's gone. But if future transport's got a place for electric aviation or electric regional aviation, then Kapiti Airport will be a significant asset for the economy by ensuring links to the rest of New Zealand, by stimulating business and investment to the airport surrounds and the district as a whole. And if it turns out we don't need it, well, we can always use it for something else. We've got 130 hectares there that can be turned into something that's seen as useful by the people of the late 21st century. So what could Kapiti District Council do? I think the first thing is make sure the airport site and its future as a mixed-use aviation and business hub is reflected as being very important in the LTP. Keep our options open again. Facilitate the original owners' efforts to reacquire the airport land so that they can develop it for the long-term benefit of themselves and Kapiti. The LTP should reflect that KCDC wishes to have a say in the future of this land on behalf of the community, and it will become involved in ways that allow it to have this influence beyond just the zoning. Recognise that, as was proven in Kaikoura and more recently on the East Cape, the airport's a valuable potential civil defence asset. Make this a policy in the LTP, keep our options open. And finally, recognise the unique transport hub we've got here in Kapiti, the railway with coming fast and frequent services to Palmerston North and environs, and that's a fast growing area. State Highway 1 and the airport are all within 3 kilometres of one another. Good space exists around them for businesses attracted by these transport links, somewhere for people in the district to work. So I'd say recognise this and reflect preserving this present and future opportunity in the LTP. And that's it. I was trying to keep it short, but yeah, just recognise the airport as a valuable asset is my point.
Absolutely perfect. Thank you. Any questions?
Oh, thanks, Madam Chair. Yeah, thanks, Michael. That was excellent. Yeah, you just alluded to enable original airport owners to acquire the airport land. Could you just elaborate on that?
Yeah, well, look, I haven't got a huge list of ideas, but one of the things that the council could do, apart from all helping and by recognising the airport and the LTP and recognising the aspiration of the former owners, who are mostly the Hapu, you could provide some officer resources to help them organise, turn their aspiration into a proper project that can actually reacquire the airport. And that doesn't mean the council buy it, it simply means facilitating professional help to help them get organised. And I mean, I'm sure there'll be plenty of other things you could do, but that would be a start, a practical
Perfect,
start,
thank you.
because I don't think the Kapiti ratepayers want to buy and own an airport.
Thank you very much. At the moment, of course, it's owned airport land, isn't it? And the electric aeroplanes too, that was an interesting one. We did have an electric light aeroplane come in. He came over Cook Strait, of course, and he was heading for Wellington. Wellington weather was bad and he was getting anxiety, range anxiety. But yeah, did you have in mind national airlines like Air New Zealand operating from Paparam with the electric?
It's hard to say exactly what the future is going to be, but electric aircraft are just not going to be able to be Airbus sized. So the future could well be aircraft more like the size of the Air Chatham's aircraft going, instead of hub and spoke, going straight from the spoke to the spoke. So direct services. You can't be sure, but what I'm advocating is keep the option open for Kapiti.
Oh, thanks, Michael. That was excellent.
Yeah, I can imagine range anxiety in an aeroplane must be more intense. Councillor Wilson?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for that, Michael. I guess it would probably require a private plan change at some stage, should the airport, the owners want to do that. I was just wondering, the 130 hectares, have you, I'm not trying to throw you under a particular bus here, but have you kind of mapped that, where that 130 hectares might be, what it might look like? Has there been any exercise on that?
Yes, I worked out a reasonably detailed plan for the airport for Kapiti area, and I think they're talking to you at the end of the hour. So, I mean, I can actually share that with the council. It's about a 20-page report looking at how the legal aspects of operating the airport, its economics, how you'd cut the land up. And I thought about 20% of it could be housing. Yeah, so I have done that work.
I'd love to get a copy. That would be really a valuable tool. Yeah,
Yep.
Thanks.
I can submit that through to Jane, I think. Yes.
Yeah, cool. Thanks.
Councillor Coe?
I guess this is a rather contentious issue. I have an alternative view, but I just want to ask you to what extent you think it's worthwhile council investing time and money into airport matters when it has no ownership rights over the land, and when there is an issue around what happens if the land is sold and the iwi involved have rights to potentially acquire that land back again. So there's considerable uncertainty around the future of the land. So we have no ownership rights. We do have some control, if you like, in terms of the district planning side of things. But beyond that, it's really, you could almost say, none of our business, really, because it is not in our ownership.
Sure. I mean, I think the development of the district's definitely within council's remit, infrastructure and so on. And you're right, if you've got no ability to influence this beyond a certain point, at that point, I think the council would have to cease putting resources in. What I'm suggesting is that sort of seed activity to see whether or not the land can be returned to the original owners, whether or not they're prepared to commit to the core of it staying as a bit of the district's infrastructure. If in the end that's not possible, you are correct. The council has no further role unless it wants to become an airport owner.
And do you think it would be worthwhile looking at what is the best economic use of that land for Kapiti? Because if you take a greenfields approach, you could say, okay, we've got a bunch of land there. What is going to give the best economic return for Kapiti? Is that, a worthwhile exercise to do? Because, there are lots of alternative uses of that land.
And I think the council would have to do a sort of a 5-stage business case, that sort of thing, before as part of that process. But I mean, I'm no expert on human behaviour and economics, but the point about transport links is districts develop and build around places where there is transport, ports, major routes crossing, airports. Palmerston North is really going ahead because after dark it's a place where road, rail and air interchange, all New Zealand's parcels traffic. So I think you would of course have to do that study, but improved transport links do in themselves generate business.
Of course, despite having an airport, we haven't seen that happen here, so I'll leave it at that.
No, that's a thought rather than a question. Councillor Halliday.
Yeah, hi Michael. Look, I just wanted a bit of clarity. We've got a presentation from Air Bourbon a bit later on today. There's a map in there by Moller Architects. Is that the map you're referring to?
I did some of the work that Gordon Moller used to create his plan, so some of the calculations and so on.
The one you're referring to is a different one, is it?
Yes, it's my work,
yeah. As well. Okay, that's cool. That was just clarifying that.
Yeah, and I'm here as an individual.
Oh, no, I appreciate that. Just happened to have the map here and I was just looking at it, that was all.
That does reflect the calculations I did on land use.
Lovely. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much for your time today,
Thank you.
Michael. Really appreciated. So now I've got Paul Turner, who's got 2 submissions for 2 groups of residents. So we'll start off with the first one, which is the one with Garrick Andrews, Susan Wagner, etc. And that's to be found on page 38 on.
Madam Chair.
Welcome, Paul.
Thank you. Madam Chair, councillors. Yes, I am here. I'm a land development consultant from Waikanae with Landlink, representing a number of landowners north of Waikanae. Vaughan Westray, Brett Milnes, Susan Wagner, Sophia Space Trust, and Janice and Garrick Andrews, and they all live Greenhill Road, State Highway 1, essentially the area in the triangle from Waikanae north to Peka Peka. The long-term plan is a forward-looking infrastructure, has a forward-looking infrastructure strategy, which builds on the existing work from the current long-term plans and sets out some objectives to create a resilient and robust network essentially for water and wastewater. These landowners support that. They support the identification of their properties in some amended service area boundaries, which arguably is a precursor to thinking about growth into north of Waikanae. The Kapiti became the envy of the country with its water meter supply project. Infrastructure is an issue around the country. Funding of infrastructure is an issue around the country. the landowners in this zone are supportive of gaining some confidence about an infrastructure strategy that allows them to be part of the future of the coast. The documents talk about how the long-term plan delivers a significant capital works program to maintain levels of service and support growth, and is critical to the ongoing resilience and sustainability of the district's water networks, that's water in particular. We've all heard about Wellington's water woes. The program of work set out, current program and future programs, seeks to avoid those sorts of issues by building on a resilient network approach, and the landowners support that. Thank you.
Fantastic. Any questions? Councillor Pravanov.
Thank you, Paul, for coming along today. Just a little thing, but I noted that I think it was three of the submitters had the same address, 199 State Highway 1.
That'll be our mistake in terms of the documents put together. I'll look to resolve that with whoever needs to know.
Thank you. So I think that's a total area of about 206 hectares. If that is correct and it was made residential, how many, and this is how long's a piece of string, how many potential residents, houses could that hold?
I guess that's one of the challenges with an area like this. It's fragmented. There's topography issues. There are wetland issues, groundwater. There's all these delicate design and construction issues that need to be contemplated, and they're all individual landowners. So that's a tricky one to answer because they all have different motivations as well. But their common motivation is to have some confidence in the future, and that's where infrastructure plays a big part. You can't have growth without that infrastructure. Is growth the right thing? Well, when we talk about a long-term plan, DCs are an important component of funding the infrastructure. So one of the previous submitters talked about greenfield versus brownfield, the potential to identify where costs lie. There's been a lot of work gone into the strategy and the funding models already. So it's probably the fairest way to deal with things. Arguably, new infrastructure lasts longer, doesn't need as much maintenance compared to existing infrastructure, which needs more, and that's the point of why we need resilience, is to ensure that older infrastructure isn't the cause of the problem. So I'm not answering your question about intensification and what the result might be. That's another step in the process.
Thank you.
Councillor Wilson.
Yeah, thanks very much for that, Paul. That particular piece of land, how subject is that to flooding? And the reason I raised that, of course, is because the infrastructure required for an area that ponds is significantly greater than not. So I was just wondering about that.
My understanding, having worked in and around that area for a while, is that on the fringes of that zone there are flood risk issues, particularly along State Highway and to the north. They also represent an opportunity, though. There's the Takatoa Kapiti project. There's the opportunity to contemplate where managed retreat opportunities exist, and that's a truly forward-looking matter to discuss. So, as a land development consultant, stormwater and flood risk is the number one issue that we look at when we're contemplating opportunities for growth. And there's no doubt that this area has its issues. There's peat, there's sand, there's a lot of things to work through. Infrastructure is probably the key element of certainty that can assist this area.
Yep. Okay, no thanks. Just
Councillor Cofer.
Oh, thanks, Madam Chair. Paul,
Hi, Rob.
as a very experienced surveyor and a man of the land, you'd know from grassroots about the natural hazards, and Councillor Wilson just asked you about that. Hey, you mentioned, okay, just looking at the future with the view to climate change, and you mentioned managed retreat. That's existing places at risk or future houses that we may be giving, consenting, being at risk. Could you just clarify that?
That's a separate process in terms of the coastal erosion, inland inundation, potentially a plan change still to come to identify what the. I'm sure that'll be a long, well-considered process. And managed retreat is the last option that anyone wants to take. It may be, somebody put it this nicely recently, that it's insurance retreat, which will be the issue. We have a coastal margin, that's Kapiti Coast. We have the first few hundred metres, 300 or 400 metres from the coast to essentially some large dunes, which behind that land is elevated. It has its flood risk issues, but those areas behind that first large dune represent opportunities to contemplate development which can accommodate growth into the future, but also look after stormwater management. I guess that's one of the issues with growth overall. When we're looking at individual sites, you've only got a very small opportunity to deal with the issues at hand. Stormwater is a catchment-wide issue, so plan changes for, let's say, council plan changes for growth into certain areas can take a broader view at these issues and not need to worry about individual sites. So so managed retreat, I'm not sure if that's been considered in the HBA and the assessment of capacity that the district has. This is a 30-year document, and we should be contemplating 30-year opportunities.
Thanks, Paul.
Great. Now there's a further submission on behalf of Harold Brown, Esme and Chris Brown. Would you like to move on to that one?
Yes, and added to this is the Osborne land. I'll chat about them shortly as well. So Chris and Esme Brown and Harold Brown live at the northern end of this triangle up to Pekapeka. North of their land is the old Narara Road, an unformed road, and north of that is the expressway, the interchange at Pekapeka. The growth strategy identifies all of the triangle as a potential medium-term growth area. So the Browns submit that their land, which is excluded from the service area identified in the development contributions policy, should be included in that policy. It's an area that logically should be included in that area. In fact, a potential route for networks goes within 20 metres of Chris Brown's house. So they have similar interests to those other landowners north of Waikanae, yet their land has been excluded from a service area boundary. Sorry, I didn't finish the Osbornes. So the Osbornes own the land that was actually talked about 20 minutes ago, opposite the Narara development, and that's in Waikanae at the Timuana interchange. So they've acquired that land back from NZTA after it was acquired from their family some years ago. We have been working with the Osbornes towards a plan change in that particular area. It's got service pipes at the front gate. It also represents an opportunity for a connection for rising main back to the wastewater rising main back to the treatment plant. And I understand the infrastructure team have been contemplating the opportunity there, and the Osbornes are open to that. Once again, it represents a parcel of land that's been isolated by the expressway project. Logically, is a simple inclusion into residential land for Waikanae. We all drive past it with the purakawa trees on the left, and yeah, the Osbornes are supportive of their land being included in the service area boundaries.
So I'm just confirming, is that the Osborne's private residence, or is it land, KYS land, Kapiti Youth Services?
So that's private landowner land. Yep.
Okay, Councillor Wilson?
Yep, thanks. The plot thickens with the stuff.
Yeah.
So when we were talking to Gerald Rice before about the plan for a Waikanae beach hall.
Yep.
So that's the land that we're talking about, right?
I believe so.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I wonder if they're aware of what's proposed here, and if what's proposed here runs counter to what it is that they're looking at.
Yeah, that was news to me in
Yeah.
terms of, you know, I guess through the Plan Change 2 process, we identified that there's a local centre where the bakery and so on is. There's also a local centre identified in the district plan at Narara across the road. These parcels of land are well suited to, they're an intersection literally of a number of communities, and the opportunities for public facilities is certainly one to consider.
And my other question, which relates probably to both, and so I'm just trying to get my head around this. So I'm a big fan of building and making sure that you've got infrastructure in place before you develop, but in this situation, there would be a significant investment in infrastructure prior to a developer contribution, right? Because the developer would then have the option to develop or not. And if assuming that they decided not to, for whatever reason, then there would be significant infrastructure there, but also a cost, and none of which would be recoverable, right?
Yeah, so I think that's a bit clear that that's the request, and that's something that we just need to
I just want to
consider.
get that. Just looking for clarification on that, that was all. Yeah.
I will be speaking for Peka Peka Farm shortly, and I think that's the key opportunity, as Peka Peka Farm represents a significant single landowner. I'll talk to that later, but and there'll be benefits along the way, literally, with other properties that might well benefit from the infrastructure that would be provided for a larger neighbourhood. So, yes, you're right. We have spoken to a number of our clients. There was one that chose not to want to submit, but they're all supportive of the opportunity to enhance this area. It makes logical sense. The conflict is that there are multiple landowners, all with their own agendas, their own timing, and so on. So you're absolutely right that that's a difficulty with expanding into an area without confidence.
Councillor Halliday?
Yeah, thank you, through you, Madam Chair. Thanks for this, Michael. Sorry, Paul. Sorry, yeah, I'm just trying to get my head. I'm a layman in this space and been through PC2 and that sort of stuff, so I've got a bit more of a handle on everything here. But I think I had been hoping someone would clarify a bit more, just to give me a bit more of an understanding what's actually being asked for here and that sort of stuff. I know that we'll get a report back from officers as such that will talk to this, but am I picking that this is a, should we say, an infrastructure request or should we say infrastructure indicator rather, and it sounds like you might be going through a private plan change process as well as part of this in some parts of it, but it's fundamentally an infrastructure request.
Yeah, so the long-term plan sets out an infrastructure strategy and a funding model, and some of the infrastructure network work is already in place, is already budgeted for. This is an extension of that work.
Right, okay.
These landowners, so one of the key documents is the Development Contributions Policy. Development Contributions Policy is proposed to amend the boundaries of the service areas for water and wastewater in a number of areas, and in particular north of Waikanae. And so they support the changes to those service area boundaries and support the consequential costs of infrastructure on rates and development contributions in particular. So yes, it's a stepped process. The Peka Peka Farm project is a bigger beast that can facilitate what Councillor Wilson was talking about in terms of the timing of the delivery of the infrastructure.
Lovely. Okay, that clears it up a little bit more for me. Thank you very much.
So, Councillor Profanov, do you have one question or more? Because we're starting to run really behind time.
Yeah, I have one question. So,
Thank you.
Peka Peka Farm, when it comes to stormwater, how would you envisage that would occur given the lie of the land?
Can I talk to that when I speak at
okay.
4:40? It's about an hour away.
Okay.
But that's a key contributor to the project.
And we'll park that question.
Okay.
Great, and we'll park you too, Paul, until 4:40.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. So we've got one more submitter online, Somerset Group Holdings, before we take a short break. Welcome, Oliver.
Thank you. Kia ora and good afternoon, councillors.
Good afternoon.
Thanks for the opportunity to speak to Somerset's submission on the proposed Kapiti Coast District Council draft Development and Contributions Policy 2024. For brevity, I'll call it the DC's policy from here. By way of introduction, I'm Oliver Boyd. I'm the National Development Manager at Somerset, and in my role I have operational oversight for all of our new acquisitions from before we buy the land through to the start of construction on site. I appreciate that you've had many submissions on the DC's policy and other submitters are here to hear from today, so I'll keep my presentation brief and I'll assume that you've read the submission specs in more detail to what we're seeking in the DC's policy. I'd like to introduce Somerset, for those that aren't aware of us, and explain what we do. Somerset's New Zealand's second largest developer and operator of retirement villages, and that makes us one of New Zealand's largest home builders. In fact, in March 2023, we were ranked second largest residential builder by value behind Fletcher's. Somerset has 38 villages completed or in development across New Zealand and provides a range of living options for more than 8,000 residents. Somerset has a proven track record of over 30 years in building and operating high-quality comprehensive care retirement villages. And I'd just like to draw your attention to that distinction between comprehensive care retirement villages and lifestyle villages, as it's relevant in the context of levying development contributions. Somerset builds only new comprehensive care retirement villages, which means we provide a continuum of care within the site, as opposed to lifestyle villages, which have minimal or no care provided. Given that care component, comprehensive care retirement villages attract an older cohort. New Zealand's facing a housing crisis, including retirement living and aged care. The Kapiti Coast is not immune from that, and forecast in your own DC's policy, note the population is due to increase over 22,000 people from 23 to 53, and with an increasing proportion of the district's population expected to be over 65. The population and demographic change will result in even further demand for retirement villages and aged care. It's vital that the regulatory environment recognise and provide for development that is required to meet that growing demand, and that funding for infrastructure is done on a fair, equitable and proportionate basis. Turning to the DC's policy now. For comprehensive care retirement villages like Somerset, the per unit occupancy is reduced compared to a typical household unit, where the DC's policy assumes 2.2 people per household, or residential unit equivalents as they're termed in the policy, RUVs. 2.2 people is assumed. Somerset's average occupancy, however, is for its independent units is 1.3 residents per unit, and for our care units, occupancy is 1 resident per unit. In addition to recognising that unique population discount for comprehensive care villages, the development contributions policy should also recognise a further reduction due to the unique low pattern of demand as a function of the elderly cohort that occupy our village. An example of that is a reduced demand on community infrastructure and civil amenities and facilities when compared against the demand assumptions of a typical household unit. Residents entering Somerset's village on average are 81 years old and have specific physical and social needs and access to Somerset's extensive range of on-site amenities. To fairly account for that lower demand profile, both a population discount to account for that lower occupancy and a demand factor discount to account for that older demographic and the on-site amenities needs to be applied to the contribution calculations. In our submission, we draw your attention to the recent Tauranga City Council Development Contributions Policy. Through years of our industry submitting on their proposed DC's policies, Council have finally acknowledged that it needed to undertake its own independent review and assessment of the unique demand factors for retirement villages to inform its new DC policy. The review was completed in 2023 and Council have now proposed to adopt the discount factors noted in that report in their latest DC's policy, a copy which is attached to our submission. And we consider that TCC's DC's policy has proposed a fair, equitable and proportionate development contribution through their proposed discount factors based on the expected demand from their independent study. We therefore seek that your council adopt that demand factor discount that's proposed by TCC and outlined in our submission. Thanks for the opportunity to speak, and I welcome any questions on our submission.
Thank you for your presentation today. And you said at the start, for those of you who aren't aware who we are, I think in Kapiti we're very aware what Somerset is and what you provide. So thanks for coming along today. David Cochrane.
Thank you. A few questions, but they're brief, and I think the answers can be brief. What's your footprint in the district at the present?
Good question. We have a new village that's in development at Waikanai and an existing village in Parapara, and I believe those are the two.
Yeah, can you tell us about future plans, or are they confidential?
I can't really talk to anything outside of the current existing villages. We're obviously, we like Kapiti, we expect there is a growing demand for our product. Waikanai village has been, for sale for a while now and has gone well to date. So, I can only give you assurance that we'd probably look for another village in the not too distant future.
Thank you. You obviously have a lot of care units, aged care rooms and things, as well as the, if I say slightly more standard retirement village that you see. What's your ratio of staff to residents? I mean, the staff have impacts on the community as well. They have to get here, get to work, home from work, use facilities.
And so when it depends on what element of the contributions policy we're talking about, but in terms of like traffic movements, for instance, our average per person is around 2.5 or 2.6, and that includes staff movements. And then when it comes to water and wastewater, the demand rates that we normally talk about in our resource consent, civil infrastructure reports take into account, toilets, demands and whatnot for staff on top of our residents' demands.
Okay, I won't take any more time, but just can you help me? I've read the Tauranga report, and you say they include allowance for staff and visitor transport, but they don't mention staff and they don't mention visitors.
Well, I'm saying in terms of what we understand is a fair and reasonable levy, that our resource consent is probably the best place to look in terms of our actual demands from each village, and we're saying within those that we have taken into account staff and visitors.
Well, yeah, I mean, but it says RV units are likely to generate relatively minor demand, except stormwater, due to the older age, immobility, etc., and the often significant provision of on-site. Well, that's all for the residents. It's not for the staff or the visitors. They're add-ons, aren't they? They're add-ons to the Tauranga report, not included in it.
Well, Tauranga feel differently, I guess, and all I do is invite you to undertake your own assessment. You know, I think that's probably the best way to give yourselves comfort that the contribution is fair and proportionate.
Well, you're asking us to apply this assessment.
So we've got the proposed assessment in front of us. We would, obviously, if we decided to follow this up, we would be doing our own assessments of the impact in terms of any potential reduction. I've got a couple of questions that I kind of want to ask, but I think we can find them out offline if we decide to go through that process. Mine was around on-site water retention and stormwater and that kind of thing, but I think I'll park those for now. And I'd encourage other councillors to do the same today, because we could start to try and analyse this now in terms of the impact on the systems, but yeah, I don't think it's something we should get into today. We have the proposal in front of us. We'll do our own analysis if we choose to go down that path. Councillor Pravanov?
Yes, so thank you. So I'm a Waikanai Ward councillor, and I'm fully aware of the rest homes in Waikanai, and I suppose I just wanted to follow up on one of the comments that Mr. Crockman made in terms of this submission focuses very much on the residents, but I'm really interested to know what the impacts, for example, are on staff movements, on parking on streets, and there have been major issues previously. And I'd be interested to hear your views on those, please.
I think, as I said, that would be part of the analysis that we'd do if we decided to take this any further, rather than trying to answer that right now.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I would probably just, if I can comment,
yep, sure.
I would just direct you to the resource consent traffic assessment, which talks to staff traffic movements and the provision of parking on site, which was accepted by the panel that determined that resource consent.
Thank you. Councillor Wilson?
Yeah, thanks for that, Oliver. I was just wondering if there's any room in Somerset's thinking to have your developer contributions increased, given that Somerset Group made a profit of 436 million last year and about 200 and something million the year before.
We all know, Councillor Wilson, that development contributions aren't based on any profit margins.
Well, I'm providing the context for my question. So my question is, given that Somerset have made $700 million profit in the last 2 years, do you think it's fair that the rest of the Kapiti community might have to absorb some of those costs for you? I'm just wondering what
you can respond to that if you choose. I think it might be a slightly tangential question.
No?
I think it's probably a question for Parliament, who put in place the Local Government Act and the basis in which they have chosen to levy development contributions and that fair and reasonable aspect of it. In terms of our profit, we're a listed company, everyone can have a look at that information, but I would say we plough most of our profits back into developing further villages for the people of New Zealand, and if you want to find out more about the crisis New Zealand faces, I think it's only going to become worse in the next 10, 15 years, and we need to build every village we possibly can to cater for our elderly population. So we certainly, the majority of our profits go back into building more villages.
I did have one other question just in relation to this, because we've asked this before, and that is there any, do you have any proposal to include low-cost housing in your retirement villages?
So we are generally linked to median house price of the catchment that we're located in, and let's say most people come from within a 5 kilometre catchment. we're generally, 80 to 100% of the median house price in terms of pricing our units. So by definition, and there are a few definitions of affordable housing, we are affordable for the residents that are most likely use our products and services. So yeah, I think we're affordable for our residents. Does that answer your question? Or
Yeah, no, that's fine. Yep.
Thank you for your responses to those slightly challenging questions. Councillor Coe.
Right, a very brief one. Look, I just want to clarify the impact of development contributions on your bottom line, taking a different tack than Councillor Wilson, because I'm assuming that development contributions are in fact passed on as a cost to purchasers of the units. We know there's an excess demand over supply for most retirement villages. So I'm presuming there's no negative financial implications for you. I can understand the equity side of things, fair and equitable, but on the other side of the coin, it's the cost is in effect borne by the purchasers of the units. Is that correct?
Well, it's another construction or development cost of enabling a new village, and I think there's sort of bookends to it. We're more linked to median house price in terms of what we can actually, what the market will sustain. But generally, if there's an increased cost of construction, then there's going to be an increased cost.
Yeah, and given the shortage of supply, that's not necessarily an issue.
Yeah. So, but I mean, a point I would make is that, we were looking around the country and saying, where do we put our next village? Where there's a development contribution that is extraordinarily high, like Drury and Auckland, for instance, it does put us off, and it can be the difference between putting a village there or not. And so there is that aspect, but also just to keep in mind that when we put a new village in, we've created essentially 400 odd new ratepayers. So there's a new increased rate pool that is created through that development.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks for your presentation today and taking all those myriad of questions. And we'll look forward to considering your submission in the coming weeks. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you.
So we are going to take, even though we're running quite late, we are going to take a brief comfort stop. And for those of you who are slightly delayed, it's worth it to have fresh, not grumpy councillors. So we'll just we'll aim for 5 minutes to be back at 4 o'clock. And so just a brief, grab yourself some refreshment if you need it, and then come straight back.